Hi, everyone. So glad to have you here today. Welcome to the Friday Forum. I'm your host, Cyndy McDonald. I'm an educator, an entrepreneur, and a global traveler. I love covering topics of higher education from our point of view as a counselor, as a professional, but they impact the students and the families that we work with. So, my guests are all experts in these areas of interest to you and those that are current cutting edge topics. And so we're all interested and passionate about helping students on their journey to higher education. So today I'm so pleased to have with me a special guest, Jasmine Gurley from Morehouse College. And she is going to talk to us about the importance and value of HBCUs in our society today. To let her know about you as you're logging in, if you would put in your name and your location, and that way she can see all the different places that everyone is from today. And as you're doing that, I also want to remind you I have Carmen here today as well, and she is going to be monitoring the chat and the questions. If you have questions as we're going along, put them in the Q&A and we'll be able to get to questions. This is a really important topic. I heard Jasmine speak at the recent HECA conference when we were in Atlanta, Georgia. Jasmine is the Senior Director of Brand Marketing and Communications and a press secretary at Morehouse College. And she's been at the college since 2021. I don't know how you get that whole long title on anything that you do, Jasmine.
We love long titles in academia. You know that.
That is true. That is very true. So, Jasmine leads internal and external communications, social media, and content development. She's also involved with the public relations, brand development, and marketing, which that all could be a whole nother conversation from a whole a marketing social media perspective. Merchandising, she does TV and film projects, as well as executive and crisis communications. Jasmine is an alumna of North Carolina A&T State University. I'm sure many people in my audience are familiar with that. Has worked in PR, marketing, and communication roles in both agency and in-house capacity. And she's worked in corporate, Home Depot, in lots of different aspects. At Home Depot, she led several record-breaking PR turned sales campaigns, including the company's first tagline change in over a decade to "How Doers Get More Done." And so thank you, Jasmine, for being here today. We're glad to have you here as a representative talking to us about HBCUs and their importance. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. And I know that was a mouthful of things to say.
Well, you have quite an
Thank you for
impressive,
committing to saying it.
you have a very impressive resume, and it shows the background and it shows the arc of where you've done, and you've been in corporate and now you're back at the college. So tell us how that happened. Tell me how you went from, college to corporate and then back to college.
Yeah, so when I graduated from A&T, I went straight into Teach for America. So that was my initial indoctrination into the education space. And I taught ninth grade algebra in New Orleans, in the Ninth Ward of New Orleans, which was still coming up out of Katrina at the time. Our school was a one trailer building. And I called it my freshman year of life because it was my first year out of school in a brand new city. It was a brand new school as well. So it was only ninth grade. It was a charter school,
Oh,
so
wow.
only ninth graders. So a whole lot of firsts. My first year teaching, and it blasted open my brain's perspective of where different people are living at different levels of the socioeconomic scale here in America. Um, and as a product of Washington, D.C., I was so used to seeing Black excellence for a common phrase for people to hear. because there's so many Black professionals. And I grew up with Black professionals in my parents and in my family and in my neighborhood. And it was just so easy for me to see that. I had no problem seeing that for myself. But then when I was teaching these students, they did not have that example. So their scope of what was accessible to them in their lives was so limited. And I remember distinctly a day where I asked them to do an assignment where they drew their dream house. Some of their dream houses were two-bedroom apartments versus a one-bedroom apartment
Mhm.
instead of a mansion or, I'm going to have land and live on a farm or whatever. They didn't see that for themselves because their frame of reference was so small and limited. So that's when, among many other experiences, that freshman year of life, my passion for access to developmental resources was activated. That is the root of everything that I like to do. I try to infuse it a little bit into everything that I do. So that's where it started. And then ultimately, I moved from New Orleans to Atlanta to start my PR career. I started off on the architecture, interior design, home decor, anything to make a residential or commercial space. And in that process, I was exposed to the direct opposite of what my students were living in. I was exposed to the most affluent of communities who invest in the interior design or the building of their homes. And the dining table is $30,000. And I'm literally looking at it like, that's my salary on the table, truly. And I realized they don't need me. They don't need my services. I need to figure out a way to give to people who need their story to be told. So while I was still growing my career on the agency side and then ultimately going in-house in the same industry, I had started Sankofa Public Relations, which is an agency of my own where I worked with mission-based brands across different industries. So that has looked in so many different ways, from the beauty space, working with the trichologist, which is the science of hair loss. Then I had a fashion brand where we gave underwear as an underwear brand, and we gave underwear to unhoused humans.
Oh,
And that was a campaign to launch their brand. So anybody who was mission based in the beginning, I was working with them. And between that work, that kept me with my feet on the ground and in the community. And then I had my formal 9 to 5 on the agency and in-house side, where both of those were simultaneously just building up my skill set and exposure to needs and opportunities and blasting open my brain around how we could do storytelling in so many unique ways. And ultimately, that got me to the Home Depot, where I took on Retool Your School, which is an HBCU grant campus improvement program. And
oh.
I did the PR for that. And because of the work in that space, as well as work that I did as an alum of A&T, uh, that ultimately got the attention of Morehouse. And via a sweet little LinkedIn message, my entire life pivoted when I was hired as the director of PR and communications. And it's 4 years later, two promotions later, and a team of seven and a extended team of 34 students who work with our office. It's been an exceptional whirlwind journey where I love the work that I do. I always say I get to do it, I don't have to do it.
Mhm.
And I make sure I hire people who think the same way, who get to do this important work, are not just coming here for a paycheck, because it is incredibly important, the work that Morehouse specifically is destined to do, and the legacy we have to uphold as the storytellers of the college and its people. So that is going to be the last thing I say about myself to wrap it up. But that is who I am in a nutshell, how I got here.
Well, I think that's very pertinent to what we're doing or what we're talking about, though, is just that impact and looking for that mission. I know a lot of people in my industry, we feel the same way. I hear this all the time. I love the work I do. And we're so fortunate to be able to do that.
Yeah,
So, in your
agreed.
opinion, what sets HBCUs apart from other institutions?
The history. The history is incredible. I joke with folks who like to say, that there's different areas of the world that have different Black communities. And I'm like, oh, we're our own little mini HBCU. And so that H, the history part is the part that differentiates it from being an HBCU because these spaces were built historically for the advancement of Black people out of a need, out of a sheer need for higher education and not having the opportunity to go to other institutions at the time of their founding. That's why HBCUs are always in proximity to a PWI or a predominantly white institution. So A&T, for example, is 1601 East Market Street. UNCG, I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly, they are 1601 West Market Street,
Hmm.
directly down the street from each other. You have NC State and NC Central. You have Texas Southern, and then you've got UT. They're always in proximity to each other because the community in that area, the Black community at the time of founding, had to found one for themselves at the time because of
Oh.
segregation, of course. So that history and it just being a place that was built for Black education and Black success and progression, that is it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. And then for them to endure for over 100 years, some crossing over to 150, 160 plus years, that endurance of lasting through all that this country has been through in that time is also incredible and sets it apart. And then as a student at these institutions, you're a part of that legacy. You know that there is a story of someone doing something for your success. It goes back to the phrase where you plant the tree to develop the shade that you'll never sit in
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because the tree will grow. That's HBCUs. They planted the seed to grow the tree for the shade they would never sit in. But this generation of humans now are basking in that shade and building off the legacy of all the people who came before them to continue upholding and advancing the mission of these institutions and expanding their impact and showing just how important it is to tell Black stories as a part of American history, as a part of global history. It's not separate, it's a segment of it. And it shouldn't be separated the way that it is. But yeah, that is the importance of it. It's all about history and storytelling, and then the possibility of what tomorrow could bring because they had no clue. Like we are our ancestors' wildest dreams right now. And that's the honor and the impact of HBCUs.
That's amazing. I had no idea that there was that dichotomy between
Mm-hmm.
having the white institution and the black institution. It makes
Mm-hmm.
sense though, and I can see the power that that brings. So, from a historical perspective, who are some figures that would be good examples of what you're talking about, specifically from Morehouse or any
Yeah,
other
well,
HBCU?
our most famous alum is Martin Luther King Jr. at Morehouse. You can't go 10 seconds into campus without seeing King or his name or his face. We have the Martin Luther King International Chapel, which is about 43 years old now. We have a statue of him on our campus, many, many programs dedicated in his name. And it's, you know, you can't deny the legacy of this man. And it's often said that there would be no king if it was not for Morehouse because of the impact of the experiences he had when he was there. And he enrolled when he was 16 years old
Oh,
at Morehouse. And it's also a little known fact that he was a C student at
oh.
Morehouse. So it wasn't like he was the straight A student who was doing exceptional. I mean, his professors were on his tail while he was there. But it's also a testament that you never know the impact a student might have, and their grades are not necessarily an indicator of what their impact would be.
Right.
So please take that to your high school students that you're working with, or any transfer students, or anybody really. The grades are not the indicator of the future, um, but we still want you to get good grades. But King is for sure one. Another one for us here in Georgia, of course, is the Reverend Dr. and Senator Raphael Warnock is an alum of Morehouse. He's our current senator here in Georgia. There's just so many. Spike Lee,
Mm.
Academy Award winning director and producer, Samuel L. Jackson, one of the most highly booked and busy actors of our generation. I think he's just crossed over 163 films.
Wow.
That's not inclusive of television. He just had a premiere for his most recent film, Fright Night, like 2 days ago.
Oh, wow.
He's a character, literally in real life, is a character. Other alum, I'm just going off the top of the dome here. We've got Rashawn Williams, who is a serial investor in VC and serial entrepreneur who's going to have some. He's a now partial owner of the Atlanta Falcons as of this summer.
Oh,
Rashawn
wow.
Williams, the class 2001. There's Paul Judge, who is another investor and entrepreneur here in Atlanta and globally, really. There's just too many to name. I like to say that we stand on the shoulders of King at Morehouse, but Morehouse is a king maker. And
Hmm.
there are, for every king that you hear about, there's a king in every industry from Morehouse in every industry. There's an exceptional brand called Eastside Golf that was founded by two Morehouse alum from 2012 and 2011. And they are diversifying the golf industry. They're
Oh, wow.
advocating for more Black people and Brown people to get into golfing. And they have a 4-year relationship with Nike, and they just announced a new collection 2 days ago.
Oh,
And they did
wow.
a documentary on Hulu called Grails. They have a phenomenal story of all the people who have supported them, and Michael Jordan is one of their biggest supporters.
Hmm.
But there's just no limit to the. I could keep going. I could keep going. It's like a
That is,
test,
but
but you can
that's
check
what,
Instagram and you'll see more.
oh, that's definitely something we'll want to promote.
Mhm.
But when you look at it from our perspective and talking to students and having them think about why should I attend an HBCU? Why should I look at Morehouse? Being able
Yeah.
to cite these are the kinds of people, because sometimes what are some of the myths? What are some of the fears that you have that people might express? Whether they're black or white or other colors, students
Hmm.
of color, what are some of the things that you hear?
Yeah. I think the biggest myth is that HBCUs are not diverse.
Hmm.
And I say that not strictly from a space of thinking about race, because Black people are not a monolith. There are so many types of Black people. And there's Black people who say that to me. My little brother chose not to go to a HBCU with that same mindset. And it breaks my heart to this day. He's already graduated and off into his career. But it's not true, simply. There are so many different types of humans in the world. And we know that fundamentally, because I believe everyone here is educated. So you understand that we're so different. But just to have an understanding that, there are Black people who have different ideologies, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and all the intersections of our life experiences makes us different. Yes, there are similarities in our experience because of our race and where we live, like as far as this country goes. But there's so many other things that make us dynamic and interesting and add value to the communities that we get to be in, no matter where we walk in life, whether you're at HBCU or PWI or trade school or just going to the school of life. Um, Everyone is so different. So I think the myth of diversity being
Hmm.
lacking at HBCUs is the biggest one. Another one is that it is your fallback school, that
Hmm.
HBCUs are where you go if you can't get anywhere else. Um, I take personal offense to that one. And I know as a professional, I'm not supposed to take anything personally, but as an alumna, I take personal offense to that one. Our schools are rigorous. The academic programming is top tier. Our faculty care. Our students care. Our students are just as smart, if not smarter, at our institutions and are just as competitive, if I can say it that way.
Hmm.
They can get into this workforce and do the best and learn the fastest just as much as other institutions and people who have gone to other institutions. Um, those are my top two. Yeah. I
Well,
chose to go to A&T after getting into every school that I got into. And I applied to Georgetown, St. John's University in Queens. Oh goodness, I'm going back in time now. Towson University, High Point University, University of Maryland College Park, Hampton, and A&T. And I feel
well,
like there's another one that I'm missing. But I chose A&T proactively because it felt like the right choice for me. And it is like so many HBCU alums say, it is one of the best choices of my life.
so when we're working with students, then I love the fact that you talked about the diversity. Are there white students at the HBCUs?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
what
Yeah.
would be the benefit for them?
It's always so interesting because to be Black in white spaces is common, but to be
Hmm.
white in Black spaces is not common. So oftentimes when you see someone who elects to go to a HBCU and they are not Black themselves, whether they're white, of a Latin background, Asian, whatever, Indian, anything, you are very curious to understand what led them to make that decision for themselves. And oftentimes it's because they grew up in a space like that. They grew up in a Black community themselves and they said, I am extremely comfortable here.
Hmm.
I have no hesitations about being here. And they understand. Other times it's because they got scholarship money. That's
Hmm.
very transparent. They got the funding to go and they need the funds. They have to go where the money resides. So that happens. But the benefit of being in these spaces is that, the same way Black people will say about going to HBCUs, this is the one time where you get to not be a minority,
Hmm.
the vice versa. You get a lived experience that you won't get anywhere else other than at HBCU. And that only makes you a better person is when you challenge yourself to be uncomfortable
Yeah,
or to be out of your norm. We only get better in those situations.
we only get better. And we need that now more than ever. So
100%.
talk about the aspect of the civil rights and social justice and
Mhm.
how an HBCU promotes that and elevates that.
Yeah, I can't speak for every HBCU, but I could definitely speak for Morehouse. Now, Morehouse is even more unique just because of the legacy that it's upheld for the last 157 years. So many of our alum and our faculty and our staff have gone on to be politicians or social justice advocates or activists um, in this world. And because Morehouse stands on Martin Luther King's shoulders, um, we have a responsibility to be active. Um, and it's something that's very ingrained in the Black community in general is that we are very communal and tribal, where we're a community looking out for one another and looking out for the advancement of others and ourselves. Um, it's very much so the idea of if you help, what's the phrase? I have so many quotes. The phrase is if, when the white community gets sick, the Black community gets in the hospital, like we're dying, the
Mhm.
slippery slope of how the effect is because of just systemic marginalization and disenfranchisement over history.
Mhm.
So um, with HBCUs, it's like we're trying to push everything to our community to get better because we know if our community is getting better, there is a trickle up effect, not a trickle down, a trickle up effect when there's an advancement in the Black community. That means that we're bringing everybody with us.
Yeah.
It's never an exclusion type of thing. It's always very much so inclusive of saying, we know that if it gets better for us, it's going to get better for everybody else. So there's a duty, a responsibility, and it's very rooted in African principles too. If you think about the days of Kwanzaa and the principles of Kwanzaa, while Kwanzaa itself is relatively new, it's only about 70 or 80 years old, I think, in that ballpark. Those principles are rooted in African traditions that have been upheld, whether we know it consciously or don't. It's prevalent, it's ingrained in us. So that's why HBCUs operate the way that they operate. And I know Morehouse operates this way intentionally.
So tell us more about that. That I'm not familiar with that. So tell us a little bit more about that aspect.
Well, Morehouse will speak on issues that others may not. Um, as a college, as an institution, as a brand. And you never get it right with everyone.
Hmm.
It's very rare. And a real example, a recent example of that would be this past commencement when we had President Biden as our commencement speaker. And it was in the peak time of college campuses having protests around the war in Israel, between Israel and Gaza and Hamas, or between Israel and Hamas and Gaza. I should phrase it that way to be accurate. Um, there was a lot of contention. And when it was released that he would be, I should say leaked, because it was leaked before we could announce it, that he would be our commencement speaker, it was met with a lot of vitriol. There were some who were very supportive of it because he is the president of the United States. It is an honor, plain and simple. And to be one of the two institutions that he chose to speak at this year, and the other one being a military, it was, what was it, West Point, I believe it was. So he's their commander in chief. It's kind of like, what you gonna say?
Right, right,
If he
right.
says he's coming. So the only other option that he selected was Morehouse. And I just kept saying for such a time as this that Morehouse would be the one to be selected. And it was the heaviest lift of my career as someone who sits at the intersection of every voice and audience that we serve at the college. But the intentionality that we put in behind the scenes to make sure that Morehouse showed up the way that Morehouse should show up. And that goes to having conversations with White House officials about a call for a ceasefire,
Mm.
having converse and releasing of the hostages, to be clear, um, having our students, faculty, and staff, and advocating for them to have an audience with White House officials to be able to voice their concerns from their communities directly to them, where I don't have to be your conduit. I want you to be able to say it directly to the people who get to directly to the president.
Wow.
um, and we had to advocate for that, and we made that happen. Um, Hearing our students out and making sure their voices are heard, um, making sure our faculty are heard. There was a lot of contention amongst employees at the
Mhm.
college. And then it became an employee versus administration moment. But ultimately, Morehouse showed up exactly the way it should. We had some people stand in protest or turn their chairs around. We had some students, faculty, all that. Um, but 414 members of the graduating class chose as a unit to sit down and not stand or clap in their form of united protest. And the president had to earn their clap. They had to earn their praise. It wasn't just because of who you are. It's like you not gotta respect the grounds that you're walking across and the institution that this place represents. You gotta earn it. So I give this as an example. Now, ultimately, at the end of his speech, they did stand. It was the very first time that President Biden never called for a ceasefire and a release of the hostages. It was from the Morehouse stage.
Yeah.
That was the very first time. But that was because of the legwork of the Morehouse community, faculty, staff, and students pushing that through the whole way. We were adamant about, hey, this is not a place where you can just come, give nice remarks, campaign a little bit, and leave.
Hmm.
This is not the time. This is not the time. We have some issues that have to be addressed. And this
Hmm.
generation of humans are very vocal. So this is a very important moment. We communicated that so many times, and I was very pleased with our students, with our faculty and staff, and with the president and how it all went. But I give this as an example of the position that Morehouse holds and how it shows up in different spaces and the push that it gives in these situations. We just don't let things happen to us. We're going to walk alongside it, or we're going to go towards the fire versus trying to stay away from it and stay out of it. We are going to say something, we're going to do something, because if we're encouraging our students to do it, how dare we as an institution not also be an example of that?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Well, that's just so, impressive is not the right word. It's moving. It's just so inspiring, Jasmine, to hear that because yeah, you're not just putting a rubber stamp. You're turning into a megaphone that the students couldn't do that individually, and the staff couldn't do that individually. You know, the community when you're in a separate, you know, as an individual, you can't have that impact. But when the students come together, the faculty comes together, the administration comes together, just look at the impact that it brought. It's
Mhm.
just phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. So, so what do you see as some of the challenges then that HBCUs are facing right now as we're moving forward,
Yeah.
as you're coming, you know, amplifying, creating
How
those.
long do we have, Cyndy? How long do we have? The number one challenge, I will actually put these together as parallel challenges, is of course funding. We don't have the same dollars in the bank as other institutions. That is just a known widespread fact. Um, there is a tax on being Black. We just don't get the money the same way, historically speaking. So even the funding that's happened since 2021 and Black Lives Matter and George Floyd's passing or
Mhm.
murder, there's been a resurgence of funds coming to our institutions, but we're still just not there when it comes to other institutions. So that's a fact. The other piece is something that all higher education institutions are facing is the questioning of a value of a college education and the price tag on it being so high, especially at Morehouse as a private institution. Um, is it worth it? The question of that and the rise of being an influencer and an entrepreneur just by bootstrapping it and figuring it out yourself. And that question is it's very real, and it's something that we're all anticipating and figuring out a way to continue to thrive and grow um, in the midst of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's also part, I know there are two factors that are contributing to that. One is just Generation Z in general. You know, they
Hmm.
are questioning and asking why, you know, what's the return on my investment? Why
Hmm.
do I need a college education? What is the value of that for myself? And also, you have a demographic cliff coming that where the number of
Yeah.
students available is going to drop, and it's already starting, from what I
Yep.
understand. So, so those two things combined, I can see would just really create a big challenge. So. Um, does that mean HBCUs? And Carmen, I know you've got a question. I've got a question on financial aid. I can see. So we're going to get to that in just a second. But does that mean that Morehouse or other HBCUs are expanding the scope of what they're doing, like bringing in adult learners or having
Hmm.
institutes, or what are some other things that, and especially as professional educators, like if there was a seminar or a program or something that we
Hmm.
could participate in, that would be great to know. So,
Yeah. So many HBCUs are expanding into online.
mhm.
I know Morehouse has its Morehouse Online program, which is a degree completion program. So any of the students who are enrolled in Morehouse Online are have a minimum of 16 credits from another go at having going after their college degree, and this is they had to stop out for whatever reason, life circumstances, financial circumstances, what have you. But this is an opportunity for them to finish what they started. And it's only about it's entering in its third year. We just had our second cohort of graduates from Morehouse Online. We have 42 total. The first group was seven last year, um, was the difference. And we're super excited about them. The ranges in ages is the most fascinating thing because we have students ranging from, I believe the youngest is 24 to 75
That's great.
going after your degree. So a lot of institutions are going the online route, whether they're offering certificate programs. I know Spelman has a couple of certificates that you can achieve online. Um, and, some are expanding masters and PhD offerings and just trying to broaden the scope of what it is that they offer and diversify in those ways.
I think, and so those become great opportunities for counselors, parents, teachers to
Mhm.
explore and to be someone who's started a degree, but because of family, job, whatever, life
Mhm.
circumstances, then to be able to be given that opportunity to come back, I can see where that can be really positive. I know of another institution who has done that to a great extent and has really had a lot of success for that because there are a lot of adults who started it, and just that
Yeah.
fact of going back and getting your degree can have such an impact on
Mhm.
their lives and their contribution to society. So
Yeah.
so let's, Carmen, go ahead and post your question because we're going to talk a little bit more specifics here about, and this connects, I think, to your comment about just the money and the funding. And then I'm going to have a follow-up
Mhm.
question on that. So Carmen, go ahead.
Yeah, so can you please talk to financial aid awards, especially for students with zero SIA?
SAI, student aid.
Sorry, SA.
It's brand new. It's like nobody even knows what it is yet. We're not even sure if they know how to calculate them yet.
Yeah, so financial aid is a struggle for HBCUs competitively with other institutions, just like it is for us to update our infrastructure or update our campuses and have updated residence halls and dorms and student centers, et cetera, or getting the most advanced technology on our campuses. So just the dollars are a pain point for us holistically. And that does, of course, affect the scholarship dollars that are available. And I know Morehouse has its academic awards and the merit awards that it gives to some students, and it also has other types of scholarships that it offers. But it just remains to be a struggle. It really does because there's many for especially for Morehouse, like our average GPA, I believe, is like a 3.7 within this incoming class.
Oh,
So these are
I
exceptional students who you would love to offer full rides all around.
right,
You would
right.
love to be able to do that. And it's a part of our capital campaign goal. The number one pillar is to become a need blind institution, to raise enough funds to increase our endowment to a place where it is self sustaining and we can fund student scholarships without a question because there's that many students who are so deserving, who have done the work, who are aligned to the Morehouse mission. We're like, you need to be here. We wish we could pay for it all. That is a pain point. I promise you it is. And I know we're not alone in that pain. But we have this our scholarship portal that our students are able to search for the scholarships that are unique to them, whether it's by major or activity that they're involved in or service based. But there's just so many routes that we try to be as transparent as possible with what opportunities are available to our prospective students and to current students for them to pick it up while they're here. Um, but yeah, that's a little bit there. But I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So I see another question has come in. This is A good question Sylvia asked. Go ahead, Carmen.
Sure. So, how many Oprah Winfrey scholarships are awarded at Morehouse each year?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but if you reach out to me directly, I will try and get you that information. Yeah.
And then there's one in the chat.
Yeah. So, have you been seeing an increase in applications since the Supreme Court decision? If so, how much? And do you see MU becoming more competitive as a result?
Yes. Yes is the answer.
Yeah, well, that's good. Tell us a little more, Jasmine.
Yes, we have seen an increase in applications since the affirmative action ruling. Um, and honestly, Morehouse has had a steady increase in applications, really since 2020, since the Black Lives Matter movement, since George Floyd, there has been, and that's consistent across so many HBCUs, generally speaking. The attention and intention to go to one has been skyrocketing. So, for sure, since the overturning of affirmative action, we've gone up. By how much? I can't, I do not have that number off the top of my head. I really don't. But again, if you reach out to me directly, I'm more than happy to answer it and get you the data to support it. I do not want to misquote anything, numbers wise. Um, and the question says, do you see MU coming more competitive as well? Oh, absolutely. We're already a very difficult school to get into just because we're so small. We're a liberal arts college. We have about 2,500 enrolled across traditional students and online. Uh, we're a very small institution, and people are chomping at the bits to become a part of Morehouse specifically.
Mhm.
So if we were as large as a UGA, we'd be able to welcome them all in. But we just simply don't have the capacity for them all. So we have become highly selective with that increase in interest. And there's a higher competitiveness amongst the candidates who are applying. They are, like I said earlier, about the students being so brilliant. We just don't have space for them all. We don't have the funds to support them all. And we know some need the funds in order to come to our institution. So it's a balancing act that our admissions team does their just very best to be as supportive and fair and equitable as possible in that process.
So, how do you see that affirmative action decision? How has that changed or fueled the mission of Morehouse or other HBCUs?
Yeah. So on the undergrad level, it hasn't impacted us the way it would impact how it's just recently even been reported about the impact on some of the
Mhm.
high profile, highly selective institutions of our country. Think of it like your Ivies. Um, for us, our concern is about our students on the master's and postgraduate degree programs, because Morehouse is one of the top producers of Black male graduates who go after postgraduate degrees and PhDs.
And we
Just
need both. We need male graduates
yes.
doing that. And then to have the Black male graduates, we need them more than ever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, Morehouse graduates annually, more Black men than all other liberal arts institutions combined.
Yeah.
You think about that.
Yeah. That's
And for them to go out into the world, and then it's more difficult for them potentially to get into master's or doctoral programs. That's just another thing. And we know that affirmative action is going to ripple out into the corporate space too. And it has in some cases. Some companies have chosen to take that off of their application processes as well. And so there are ways for discrimination to happen. There are other routes that it can take. There are so many ways data can inform you and trends can inform you about a human being. So yeah, that's where our concern is with affirmative action. Not so much on us directly, but where they go after they're done with us, after they have succeeded at Morehouse and they're going on into the rest of their life.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's the part I think that people don't think about or realize.
Mhm.
It's not just one step, that one stage. It's not just a
Hmm.
checkbox on a form. It has ripple effects not only through undergrads, but through grads. And then that, in fact, impacts future generations. And,
Absolutely.
as we're working with, like I work a lot with first generation students, those issues are so crucial because
Absolutely.
it has such a ripple effect. So, yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, Carmen, I saw the question in the chat, and I think this is a good one to kind of you know, wrap up our conversation. And then I have one other question. So go
Yeah.
ahead, Carmen.
Um, Jasmine, can you speak to the impact of how HBCUs lift up and support students of color in a way other schools don't? So I realize
Hmm.
this may be hard to vocalize, but I find HBCU grads as a certain something that is so unique. So can you speak to that?
I see that question, Sylvia, and thank you for asking. Yes, I can speak to this. Community, community, and a sense of belonging. It goes back to what I mentioned at the top of our time to here together about it historically being a space that is built for your progression and development. Um, Anyone who comes to work at a HBCU is making a conscious decision to invest in your progression and development. Um, there is a familial environment at HBCUs. Sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't. Inherently, I become the auntie to 2,300 young men on campus, and it's Miss Gurley, Miss Gurley. It's like, I got a problem. I was like, boy, the support that we offer it's heartfelt. And this is not to say that there are not individuals who do this at other institutions. By no means am I saying that. And I'd like to believe, and I actually sincerely hope that that is exactly the experience that most people experience at other institutions. Let me go on record saying that. I know for a fact at HBCUs, because the numbers are typically smaller,
Mhm.
because of that familial piece of what it is that the Black community carries. Again, that community, that tribal, that ties to wanting to see each other do well. It's the we greater than the me type of environment. Uh,
Mhm.
there is truly a support system around you. And there used to be a time where people would say at your freshman orientation, you know, look to your left, look to your right. That person may not
Yeah.
be here. Like we look to your left, look to your right. Make sure that the person next to you
Mhm.
is there with you at the end, like holding each other accountable. You're in this together. And so many people go above and beyond just because you believe. And these kids become your sons at Morehouse. And shoot, I have daughters over at Spelman, essentially. And they're not, I don't work at Spelman, but because of how Morehouse, Spelman, Clark, Atlanta, we are cross registration institutions. So we have students who are crossing over our thresholds every single day. Um, that community is there. And it's something I think that's so unique to HBCUs because it is so very, very, very unique to Black people. Uh, and you might see things like Black Twitter and how there's all these strangers on the internet who can talk to each other like they know each other, but they don't. Or there's different gestures or handshakes or head nods or like whichever way you go and you know which one means which. It's a communal thing. I don't know why, honestly. And someone really should do a study on that. But it is so consistent at HBCUs too. So when it comes to creating a sense of belonging
Mhm.
and acceptance and a willingness to commit to your growth, that those are the three things that I believe our institutions create, and it is a top down, in out effect. Our alumni, again, are also very, very invested and supportive of our institutions, and that is not to say that other alumni are not of other institutions, but I will argue that HBCUs are very obnoxious. when it comes to the level of pride and support and love that we have for our respective institutions. It's because of what we know we received from them and the work that they're doing. I literally just posted on my own Instagram about how A&T makes it so easy to be proud to be an Aggie. It's the
Mhm.
most beautiful campus. It's just so many things about it. Um, it's it is truly the community. Now there are also structural and systemic processes and organizations and support systems that are there to ensure their well-being and their
Mhm.
growth, for sure. That's the business of the college. But the intangibles that happen just because of the humans that are there, that's what's hard to replicate that an HBCU has that other institutions just don't have.
Yeah, yeah. It's unique to that institution and to just the
It's
passion and
community.
yeah, the community. You
It's
can't
community.
replicate
That's
that.
it. Yeah.
Now, you brought up another topic that I want to touch on briefly, and then I'm going to give you my
Okay.
last question. And one of the things, too, that as counselors, we often hear is why should I go to a single sex university? So you touched on cross registration between Spelman and Morehouse. So why should they go to a single, like a male institution
Yeah.
or a female
A male
institution?
serving or a female serving institution.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's a fair question. I mean, we get it all the time with our young men. It's like, I don't want to be in class with a whole bunch of dudes. And
Yeah, who am I going to
uh,
date? You know?
yeah, exactly. I was like, first of all, Spelman is literally right outside my window. Clark is right across the street over there. This is Atlanta. There are so many undergraduate serving schools here, for what? Second, there is value in being in safe spaces amongst people who are like yourself.
Hmm.
So, just the way you have men's groups and women's groups in other areas of the world, whether it's at your church or your book club or just your friendship circles, you can see there's a level of disarmament that you can have in those spaces because you know that level of commonality is there. So HBCUs in general, as co-ed, you know that you are usually, and there are some HBCUs that are actually predominantly white in demographic, by the way. They're still an HBCU because of the power of the H. Again, back
Oh,
to that H.
interesting. Interesting.
um,
Interesting.
yeah, so there, I think there's two HBCUs, and they're both in West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. It's, Bluefield State and West Virginia State are predominantly white institutions, but they are HBCUs, or predominantly white enrollment, but they are HBCUs. Um, but having that space, that's one element. But then when you bring it to gender, um, that is where you might have, or let me say, sex, not gender. Uh, to a single sex institution, you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, there's that level of understanding. So the Black male experience versus the Black woman experiences, there are a lot of similarities, but there are also differences.
Hmm.
And then you add in the other intersections of sexual orientation, of your socioeconomic background, your religious beliefs, your different capabilities physically or mentally. Um, so all those other intersections, there are ways, that's where I say the diversity comes in, but your support system is also different because there is a level of empathy and understanding because of that unique experience. So I'd love to say, because as an Aggie, I'm very proud of it, obviously. There is something in the water in the AUC. I say that all the time. There is something in the water over there at Spelman, and there is something in the water over here at Morehouse. Because I see what our students are doing when they're 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 years old. And it's just different. And it's because of that iron sharpens iron effect, because they are not necessarily thinking about a level of discrimination that they might be facing because of X or because of Y. That
Hmm.
factor has been taken out. I don't have to worry about that. So now I'm here to try all the things I can, fail in a safe space where
Hmm.
people are going to let me fail, grow, learn, and get better. um, and coach me and just mentor me into being the best person that I can be when I leave this institution. So that there is a value in it. Now, there's some people who don't need it. A lot of people don't need it, obviously, because our institutions are so small. Not everybody will get it. But there is a value in it. And I could say, if you look at the alum from Morehouse and Spelman, and if you listen to them, you too will start thinking there's something in the water over there in the
There's something.
ABC.
Well, and I think that's one of the things, that's one of the roles that we have as counselors and advisors is being able to help dispel that myth and be able
Yeah,
to
please.
promote the benefits of that. I know I ended up at a women's college and my then became husband was at a men's college. And so, just I saw that difference firsthand. But I know even the studies show like for women's, there are more CEOs that graduated from an all-female college and the
Mhm.
opportunities that they give because of the things you cited of you take out some of those factors and they're able to excel in certain areas, on whatever sex, male or all
Yeah.
female. It's a much freeing aspect. So
Yeah.
I,
And if I could add one thing to that, it's the sense of self that a student
mhm,
develops in these
mhm,
institutions. And you
mhm,
can start at the HBCU level where it's co-ed or not co-ed, whatever it is. There's a sense of self of yourself as a Black person because most HBCUs, you're going to take African American history course, and it's going to go deeper than your general history courses that you take in probably most likely in high school and through the K through 12 era of your life. It's going
mhm,
to go deeper. And when you have this expanded understanding of the impact that Black people have brought to America and other countries and the world as a whole, your sense of possibility for yourself increases, which goes back to what I mentioned about my students in New Orleans. Um, when
mhm.
we brought them to Atlanta for a college tour, Morehouse and Spelman was not on the list. There was no HBCU on the list, even though all of them were Black, except for one young woman. Well, I shouldn't say one woman, she was a girl, little girl at the time. Our one barely speaking English Vietnamese girl in our school. She was the only one, but everyone else was Black and no HBCUs were on the list. And while we were driving over, I called a Morehouse alum and a Spelman alum and I said, hey, I've got 50 kids on this bus. We need to add Morehouse and Spelman to this college tour. And they made it happen with their institutions. So we had a chance to split our groups up. The girls went to Spelman, the guys came to Morehouse, and who knew that, you know,
Yeah.
12 years later, I'd be working at Morehouse. But like the sense of self is cultivated. Your sense of possibility is cultivated because you go into these spaces and you see, oh, this person's actually really, really brilliant. I was the only brilliant one in my class, but now I'm rubbing up against 300 other guys who are fantastic and also smart, or young women who are also the brilliant people from their respective schools. If they were the only Black kid or one of the few, now you're in a sense of everybody around me is awesome. Iron sharpens iron. There's only the chance to get better.
Mhm. Yeah, you don't
And I
feel.
have to say, for counselors, I say all these stories for you to carry them to your students, to the people that you talk to your colleagues. Um, the power of sharing stories is so important. That's why you keep hearing me say the word. Um, but that is how HBCUs will continue to live and thrive and grow. And the understanding of their impact and importance and relevance will continue to grow. You telling our stories in the spaces that you occupy that we're not in. You can always invite us in. We'll be happy to come and tell our stories ourselves. And that could be through an alum, a current student, an employee, whoever. Um, but in the rooms where we're not and you are there, you can reiterate some of this to them. And again, if you ever need me, I am here.
Thank you. Well, that was my last question. You just hit it right on the head. It's like,
Oh, great.
what can we do as counselors to help promote? And you tell your stories and tell our stories
Yeah. Say
and
our names. Say
yeah.
our names in the rooms where we're not. Keep us in consideration. Please don't rule us out. And I would also encourage to look at other HBCUs. I know that there are some that always rise to the top of the news cycle or US News and World Report rankings and all of that, but that does not mean that the other HBCUs are not valuable.
Right.
So if there is a kid who wants to go into, medicine, I need them to also be thinking of Meharry Medical College. I need them to think about that. I need TSU. I need Fisk. I need uh, the Prairie Views, the Gramblings. I need them to live and thrive, and their communities need them to live and thrive. So don't think just Howard, Spelman, Morehouse, A&T, FAM. There are others, and they are just as important, and they need the brains of this generation to pour into them just so they can pour into the students themselves as they go out into the world and then give back to those institutions. That's the cycle we need. So
Yeah. Well, we will
please
try
go
and
forth and
do our
prosper.
best. Yes, no, absolutely. And that's what we try to do as counselors. We try to broaden our students and their families' perspectives and help them see what they have to contribute to an institution, what they can bring because there is an institution there that will want that. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Jasmine. I know you're very busy and appreciate your time and efforts, and this has been very inspirational. So thank you for being here
Great.
today.
Thank you. My last plug is our counselor symposium
Yes, let's talk
at
about that.
Morehouse. So
Yes.
we have a counselor symposium or counselors and access professional symposium on October 10th of this year. It's a 1 day, 9 to 4 on campus at Morehouse College. I've shared the link. It's in the chat now for registration. But we would love to have you on campus in person and meet in person and just give you a little preview of the Morehouse experience and more about HBCUs and how you can be of service to our success and enrollment and telling the stories to your students. So please take a look, reach out if you have questions, but I'd love to see you in person. October
Absolutely.
10th.
October 10th. That's not too far away. And so
It'll be here before you know it.
I'll put that in the show notes and I'll promote that out through our media
Thank you.
links and venues. So thank you again. Thank you, Carmen, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today. I hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll return the end of October for our next Friday Forum. So thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Cyndy. Thank you, Carmen.
Bye.
Bye-bye.